So Sonos firmware version 15.3 has launched, and I would say that it is a boring update. It claims performance enhancements as well as bug fixes. What has been enhanced and what has been fixed, we're not very sure, right, Sonos? So today we'll dive a little bit into that topic. Now, nothing is broken, but between broken and boring, I'll choose a boring update. So today is kind of like a boring update, but I'll give you the upfront summary so you can get on with your life without finishing the rest of the video if you don't have the time to do it. Now, the update itself to 15.3, not much has changed. The sound signature is still good and you are good to go. So there you go. If you just need that, go ahead and update. But if you're using the Era 300, I'll talk a little bit about the placement as well. Now, the placement, as you can see from my Era 300, it is actually flush against the rear wall. I mean, about 2 inches away from the rear wall. The top and the left rights are actually clear. It is below my ear level and it is facing forward. It is not angled sideways towards me. It is facing forward towards the TV wall. And the settings I use, most of it is stock except for surrounds, which I set to +4 for TV sound and a +10 for music. The heights are set to a +10 just because I like it that way for now. Now, this is by no means a best settings video. So don't use this setting. These are just the settings that I'm trying to familiarize with so that when I finally do the best settings video for these speakers, you will be sure that those are really the best settings. And the last upfront update is that the surround sound level sliders, it is still not quite fixed. Not quite fixed in the sense that the surround sound actually adjusts only the side surrounds and not the rear surrounds. I'll talk a little bit more about that if you have time to stay on throughout the whole video. So to give you an idea of what I'm hearing, right? There are many things to test. So this test was limited to the Sonos Arc with 2 subwoofers, the larger ones, as well as the Era 300. I haven't tested with the Beam, but what I have done was to swap out the Era 300 for surrounds. I swapped it with the picture frames just to get a sensing of whether things have changed specific to the Era 300 or with any standard surround speakers. So this frequency response chart that I'm pulling out here, it is actually done for 15.2 and 15.3. 15.2 is in red curve and 15.3 is in green curve. So as you can see, there's actually not much change at all. The frequency sweep was done from 20 Hz all the way to 20 kHz, and you will see that for the lower bass region, for some reason, Sonos has actually tuned it to be pretty high. So the bass is aggressive all the way up to the upper bass region, as well as the large part of the mid-range. So if you are feeling that your whole surround sound system is actually now coming across very hot, very loud, even at lower volumes, that is probably the reason why. Now, bear in mind that these frequency response sweeps were done without any true play and without any settings changes. In other words, even those recommended settings that I put up front for my testing are actually zeroized them. So what you're hearing is actually stock as per what the soundbar will get you when you buy them from the store and put them in your home. But of course, the sound is affected by my room here. So long story short, the bass frequency, the lower frequencies are very pronounced, and no one will ever complain about bass for the 15.2 or even the new 15.3 update. Now, as before, in the 15.2 update, when I installed the Era 300, the surround sound bubble was very smooth. Right? Previously, if you use a single speaker for rear surround where it has 2 drivers, a tweeter and a bass driver, you will be able to localize where the surround sounds are coming from. It is from that speaker. So I'm pointing to the picture frame because it has 1 tweeter and 1 bass driver, and you will tell that the sound is coming from that specific space. Now, for the Era 300, it has 6 drivers in each speaker. So 6 here, and it's a total of 12. Now, granted, I know some of you are thinking, hey, the center driver actually doesn't fire off when it is used in surround. Fair enough, but it's still 10 drivers in that case, even if the center drivers are not firing off. Some of you are saying that the inner drivers, which is for the rear surround, as opposed to the outer drivers for the side surrounds, are a little bit soft, but I'll get to that problem in just a little bit. But if you could hear me out, the surround sound bubble. Why is it so smooth? It's because it is now throwing surround sound to the side as well as surround sound to the rear. So it completes the entire bubble. When you're listening to any Atmos soundtracks, be it from a movie or be it from a music, you can feel that the whole sound stage is actually very complete and the sound panning is actually very, very clear without any gaps or breaks in the surround bubble. Now, the other thing is the Atmos effect. Now, the Sonos Arc on its own has 2 upward firing drivers, and the Era adds another 2 to the rear. Now, in a 7.1.4 configuration, you're going to have 4 height channels. That means front, left and right from the Sonos Arc, and rear, left and right from the Era 300s. And that completes the height channel. So your heights will not just pan from left to right, it will actually pan from front to back as well, because there are 4 virtualized Atmos heights drivers playing back the sound from the Atmos soundtrack. So with 15.3, the good thing is the surround bubble is still very, very clean, very, very complete, very, very smooth. And the heights channel, and because I have the heights channel to a +10 for testing purposes, it is actually very, very pronounced. Now I'll talk a little bit about the test files, the test tones that I'm using to test all these in the next section, where I talk about how the Era works and what the problem is with the 15.3. Now, it is not a problem that is introduced with 15.3. It is a problem that was there since 15.2 when they launched the Era 300. Now, before we get there, we have to talk a little bit about how the Era 300 works and the topology of all the drivers within the Era 300. Let me just get the speaker. This is the Era 300, right? The Era 300 has 6 drivers, 1 facing forward, and that's firing towards you. Now, this is the driver that is deactivated when it is used in a surround sound configuration. In other words, this channel is not firing anything at all. Now, there's one more driver facing upwards, and this is the one here, very aggressively angled upwards and deeply set within a cone. So this cone actually directs sound to the top of the ceiling and firing it back down. And this configuration actually greatly enhances the heights effect for your Sonos home theater system. Now there are 2 more drivers on each side, so for a total of 4 more drivers. So one here for 2, and then 2 for a total of 6. Now the side driver configuration, they are the same because there's 1 tweeter and 1 bass driver, and 1 tweeter and 1 bass driver on either side, but they play different channels. Now in a 7.1.4 configuration, you're looking at side surrounds and rear surrounds. So imagine if this speaker was behind me in that position, right? Side surround is being played from the outside drivers. So I refer to these as the outside drivers. The rear surround are being played by these 2 drivers, which I'll refer to as the rear surround. So when they are in that position right there on the stand, what I'm hearing behind me is being played by rear surrounds. What I'm hearing to the front and to the left of me are being played by the outside drivers. So what is the problem? What is the complaint? Now people are complaining that this thing doesn't fire off the center tweeter. Now I am not very sure whether it is a good thing or it is a bad thing. Personally, to me, I don't feel any problem with that, because it means that the driver is not localizing sound to itself, right? When the speaker goes off, the surround speaker goes off, I can't immediately localize where the sound is coming from. So it is not pinpoint to a specific position. And I kind of like that, which makes the whole surround bubble smoother. Now, it is also predicated on the fact that the surround speakers, the Era 300, are actually placed in a position where the outside drivers will be able to bounce against a wall to throw the sound to the sides. And this side here is actually placed slightly angled to the rear of your sitting position, such that it's able to throw the rear surround sounds towards you, so thus completing the surround bubble. But this is where the problem is, right? Because what Sonos has admitted to in the forums is that this driver is not firing off. That's fine, okay? Whether it is a design consideration, whether it was intentional or not, I'll leave it as that, because right now I do feel that it is okay. It actually makes the surround bubble a lot smoother. But the other problem is the rear surround. When you're adjusting the surround sound levels, it only affects the outside driver. In other words, your side surround is actually volume control, but your rear surrounds, they are not volume control. So you can adjust a -10 or +10 or 0. It doesn't actually affect your rear surround levels at all. So what you might perceive to be a standardized volume comes across like a reduced volume. So it feels as though the rear surrounds are not firing off, but I assure you that they are firing off, right? So I put my ear right up against it when I was playing the test tones, and it does fire off. Now, it may not change with the levels, but it is still firing off. Talking about the test tones, I'd like to show you where you can get the test tones. So I'll probably put a QR code right here. This is my own website, should I say. So I put up a website. It's www.peterp.com. So do visit the website, or you can just scan this QR code to visit the site. I'm linking this QR code directly to the demo files. I've used a few demo files for Atmos videos on my channel. The files are all there, and the 7.1.4 as well as the 5.1.2 Dolby Atmos test tones are also on that page. So you do have to ensure that your player, whether is it connected to the TV, to connect to the Sonos Arc, is actually properly configured. I'm using a Windows machine, a Windows PC, which is set up for Atmos to output the Atmos through a NVIDIA 3000 series graphics card, which has HDMI 2.1 that is capable of sending Atmos over. So I know that I'm getting all those signals. So when I use those signals, it will play channel by channel, some white noise. And when it comes through, I realize that when you adjust the surround speakers, it only adjusts the volumes for the outer drivers, which is the side surround, and it doesn't adjust the volume for the inner drivers, which is the rear surround. So I do suppose that that is a real bug that Sonos probably has to fix in the near future. But what I learned from this is that this whole setup, the Sonos Arc with the subs as well as the Era 300 as rear surround, is a true 7.1.4 channel setup. In other words, when you're playing the front, the left, the center, the rear, left and right, the side, left and right, the heights, front, left, rear, right, all of them are discrete. So the Sonos Arc setup with these babies here, they are producing true 7.1.4 channel output. Now, I do have two subs, but they are treated as one. So it's not a 7.2.4, but rather a 7.1.4. So let's talk a little bit about the sound quality. Now, nothing much would have changed, right? For movies, after I started listening to the Era 300, I could not go back to any of the previous setup. Now, I've used the Arc with any number of surround speakers, including the Sonos Ones, the Play Ones, the picture frames from IKEA Symphonics lineup, as well as the IKEA Symphonics lamp, IKEA Symphonics bookshelves, and how many? Oh, as well as the Sonos 5, which I have it out of frame, and the Sonos M driving my ceiling speakers. I've tried all these configurations, and still nothing is beating the Era 300 in terms of the surround sound smoothness and the whole bubble encompassing your entire surround feel. So I do feel that the configuration, whether the front driver is working, whether the side driver is working or not, it actually does complete the whole circle. Now, some of you are wondering whether I've kept quiet, right, not talk about this issue because I was afraid to admit that Sonos has a problem. Remember one thing, I don't care if Sonos made a mistake. If they make a mistake, I call them out, okay? This isn't my job. So if I'm not releasing any videos to talk about issues or problems with Sonos, it is not because I don't dare to say it. I will say it. It's just because I don't have the time. So I've gone through a couple of movies, right? Because besides making videos, my primary goal of spending money to buy all this shit here is for my own personal enjoyment. So I do watch my own movies, not just making movies and videos for you guys all the time. So I do watch some movies, and I've gone through some action movies, I've gone through documentaries, I've gone through YouTube videos, I've gone through so much media, and I'm actually very happy with the setup. 15.3 didn't change that. 15.3 is still good. Now, there will probably be some enhancements that can be made. I'll touch on that point just before I end the video. But before that, I'll talk a little bit about the use of the Sonos Era 300 speakers when it's being put in a surround environment for music. Now, music, I've never really listened to music on the Sonos Arc before, because when I do that, I end up having to fight between the sound coming from the Sonos Arc as well as the sound coming from the rear surround. So previously I've been using the Sonos 5 for rear surround, and I find both sources to be rather distracting. I'm either hearing the Sonos Arc throwing out music which isn't that great, or the Sonos 5 throwing out music which is trying to compete with the sound from the Sonos Arc. So it wasn't well balanced in that way. But with the Era 300 and listening to Dolby Atmos music from Apple Music, I do find it superbly balanced, especially for vocal tracks. So the vocals are coming from somewhere like the soundbar, whereas the entire ambient sound, the music, the instrument seems to be really just all around the room, including some possibly heights. Now, it is not so much heights as in there are instruments overhead, because no instruments are supposed to be played overhead, right? But it is really like throwing the reverb of the instrument and of the voice, creating a real, like a live, like a, musician present kind of situation. So it has become highly enjoyable. I'm not sure if I really want to go back to just plain stereo music. Now that said, when I do stereo music, because a lot of my playlists are compiled over the years, and from over the years, not a lot of Atmos tracks, right? So I do listen to those, and still the whole setup, including the Sonos Arc and the subs and the Era 300, it does play those songs pretty well as well. Because the Sonos Era 300 no longer brings attention to itself. It doesn't compete with the soundbar anymore. It works together with the Sonos Arc to create the music. So music has become a lot more enjoyable when I'm actually playing it over the Sonos Arc coupled with the Era 300s. Now that said, the soundstage is limited to a pretty small bubble. Now if you move out of this bubble, say for example where I'm sitting now, the soundbar is where the camera is, and the Era 300s are actually placed on stands to the back and to the rear of my sitting position. So let me just put it back so that I don't, okay, so it's back now. So the bubble of a great soundstage seems to be limited to right about where I'm sitting, plus minus 1.5, 2 feet or so. Now the moment I move out of this bubble, the sound sounds like, okay, it's coming from this speaker, it's coming from the soundbar, and it is just sound from everywhere. It is not a great soundstage anymore. Now if you are in party mode and your room is big and the speakers and the soundbars are placed in different positions far away from each other, unlike in this small room here, then you don't really care, right? Because it's party mode, people are walking all over the place, you want the sound to hit everybody, and nobody is there for critical listening anyway. And in that sense, the music, it does play loud. Now, if there's Atmos music and you find that the whole sound coming through from your whole setup is a little bit too loud, which can be the case, then all you have to do is to go to your surround sliders and bring down the surround -5, -10 for music. And that will solve your problem. Then it doesn't become very loud anymore. So when you do that, even at volume 30, it is bearable and it's not terribly loud. Now, when you don't set it, or if you push the surrounds up on the surrounds when it's paired with the Sonos Arc and you play music through it, it can get really loud. Even at volume 15, it is uncomfortably loud in a small room like this. So let's talk a little bit about what Sonos can bring to 15.4 or 15.5 or some future firmware release, right? First, let's clear the volume control. Now, since 14.12, Sonos has had some problems trying to implement a volume slider. I don't know what their problem is. Sometimes they are capping the overall volume. Sometimes they are making the lower volumes really, really low. Sometimes the lower volume, like now, is really, really loud. So what you could do for volume slider is maybe just make it linear, right? So that When you adjust it 1%, either at the low end or the high end, it moves by 1% volume. That's all you need to do, right? Or at least make it such that it is a smoother curve, right? Lower sensitivity at lower volume. So when you move from between 1 and 10, 15% on the volume slider, you don't have to increase and push it up that much, right? So smoothen it out such that it becomes linear later on in the volume slider curve. And you might also want to enable the front tweeter just for us to try out, right? Maybe we don't like the front tweeter. Maybe the whole sound effect and the whole sound stage is destroyed when you activate the front tweeter on the Era 300, but put the option there. Let us try it. If we don't like it, we'll turn it off. And that's it, right? The side surround and the rear surround should also be fixed, right? Because that is probably a bug. If you increase the surround volume, it should affect both the side and the rear surround. In other words, the outer driver and the inner drivers respectively. Now, even if you were to set 2 volume slider for 2 surrounds, I think that will work as well. So for Sonos Era owners, you can have 2 volume sliders for surround. One is for rear surround and one is for side surround. So you make that work and make the inner drivers surround sound levels be configurable. The slider is currently still broken. And maybe the last thing I'm going to ask for, which is probably not related to the Era 300, is to enable the Sonos M when it's driving ceiling speakers to receive height effects so that I can really actually, have sound coming from the ceiling. I've installed ceiling speakers in this room paired with a Sonos M specifically for that purpose. Sonos is not launching that feature yet. I don't know if they're going to launch it, when they're going to launch it. I do hope they launch it so that, well, I need to make my investment work. Okay, so that's all I have for you today for version 15.3. In short, good to go. I'll see you in my next update.